Hey guys, Miss Warren here. Today we're going to be talking about the elements of art. Now these are very important because for my class, the first semester is outlined by the elements of art. You really do need to remember these because if you continue in art, these are going to come up again. They're going to be reviewed. I even had to go over them in college. So being able to not only define them, but demonstrate them in your art and speak intelligently about them is important. So today we're just going to ask what are the elements of art? We're going to answer that question and we're going to list them. Now you don't have to write down the definitions today of each individual one, but I am going to show you the definitions of each individual one and I'm going to show you an example. Additionally, I do want you to write down or keep in your memory what they are as a whole. We will be doing an activity after this video kind of to help us remember what the elements of art are. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this is the important part for today. So please write this down, put it where you'll remember it. The elements of art are the most basic parts that make art. So you cannot have art without at least one of these things. So keep that in mind. So next week, I will most likely be asking you some review questions, maybe the week after, and I'm going to ask you to define what are the elements of art as a whole. And this would be the answer here, the most basic parts that make art. Some teachers might say the basic building blocks or the elements are the most essential parts or the tools that we use to create art. Those would be different ways you might hear this defined, but this is the definition for this class. Okay, so the first one that we're going to study this year is line. So we're starting easy. A line is a point with length and direction. So imagine that you draw a point and then you go in a direction. You drag that point, it creates a line. So here's an example with a lot of lines in it. This is by Pablo Picasso. It's the head of a woman and it was created in 1946. Okay, so our next, we're going really simple here, is shape. So we kind of logically go, you can make shape out of lines, right? So it's a two-dimensional area that's defined by an element. So the element that we looked at previously was line. And so if you look here, all of these shapes are outlined. Now, if you took those lines away, you'd still be able to see it because of the color. They're different colors, and that's a different element that we're going to talk about later. You could possibly also see it because it has different textures. Like this one, you can kind of see the paint strokes in it, the blue. It has a different texture than the things around it. So even if this was a black and white image, you could probably see the difference between the two, either because one was darker and lighter, which is value, which we'll talk about in a minute, or because the texture is different inside of it, which is we'll talk about later. So this is this painting is called Ball Game, and the artist is Alexander Calder, and it was painted in 1974. So a two-dimensional area defined by an element. Okay, value. So in art class, we refer to the use of lightness and darkness as value. So this artwork is called Drawing Hands. It's by the artist M.C. Escher. It was done in 1948. So you can see he just kind of started with line on the sleeves, but when he shaded it in using value, using not just shadows, but highlights as well. That's why we don't just call it shading, because it's also the use of highlights. The hands start to look real and three-dimensional because the value that he used. His value structure is very good on the hands, and that's why they look so realistic. Okay. Form is a three-dimensional object. Now, it can be implied form, like if you draw something and it looks 3D, or it could be a sculpture like this. This is the Thinker by Auguste Rodin. It was made in, well, this bronze statue was made in 1904, but he had made a a plaster version of it before he made the metal version of it about 8 years before, maybe 10 years before this one. So this is a form because it's an actual sculpture. It's actually three-dimensional. Sorry, move back instead of forward. Okay, color. So after we study line and then shape and then value and then form, we're going to do a unit on color. So this will be the beginning of the second 9 weeks. It is the type of reflected light. So when light shines on stuff and bounces back into your eye, it's reflected light. Now, each different type of object will reflect a different type of light, and that's how we see color. So this is called Red Canna. It's by Georgia O'Keeffe, and it was painted in 1926. Okay, texture. Texture is how something feels or looks like it would feel. So imagine if you got to touch the statue by Donatello. You probably would never get to touch the statue because look at how old it is. It's from 1453, so they have to preserve it. But if you ever got to touch it, you would definitely be able to feel, look at her clothes. They're all very raggedy and textured, and it's made out of, I believe this one's made out of bronze as well, but if you ran your hands across it, you'd be able to feel all those bumps and the jagged edges. It would be, and this is just a photograph, and we can see that it has texture as well. So it's how something feels or looks like it would feel. So the artist is Donatello, one of the Ninja Turtles, or one of the Renaissance artists. The artwork's called The Penitent Magdalene, and it was done in 1453. Okay, so space. The space is the use of an area. It includes depth. So look, you can see that the table's in front. Jesus and his disciples are behind the table, and then the room goes further off into space. This is one that we'll look at when we do linear perspective, which is how to make stuff 3D. So they're using the space to create depth and negative and positive shapes. Positive shapes are the shape of the object. Negative shapes is the shape around the object. So this artwork, you've probably seen it before, it's pretty famous, is The Last Supper, and it's by Leonardo da Vinci, and it was painted in 1498. Okay. So those are our elements of art.